Helping is doing for someone what they can't do for themselves. When I see people that are homeless, that need shelter, they need food, they're in a crisis situation, they need help. We need to be there for them. I believe the love of Jesus would have us be there to help them because they can't at that point help themselves. But when I think of enabling, and John, you've said so much of what I say, I'm going to say it in different ways and back off on some of what you were saying. But it's like we keep them in the what? Triage. And enabling, I define it this way: doing for someone what they can do for themselves. I like to say it that enabling is encouraging someone to stay in unhealthy behavior with no consequences. I think most people would agree that living on the streets, doing drugs, is not healthy behavior. It's not only good for that individual, it's not good for our neighborhoods, the business community, our parks, and what we see happening in our city. Again, when I speak of enabling, I'm not speaking about continuing to provide the resources so an individual can continue in their destructive behavior. Note, I am not talking about those with mental illness or who are not capable of taking care of themselves. But I do believe this, that the government should be there to help people that need help. I think of my friend Mark, who went through the mission, who is suffering with blindness. He's a tenant of mine, and it's difficult for him to hold down a job. But you know what I love about Mark? Every day he gets on a bus, he goes downtown and volunteers at a children's center and loves on kids. He has dignity, self-esteem, and I believe we should help people like Mark. As I think of enablement, I want to encourage you as nonprofits, as individuals, that we ask some key questions to help us identify when we're moving from just helping to enabling. And I would say here's a few. Is what I'm doing helping solve the problem of homelessness, or is it increasing the problem? What are the outcomes to the services that we provide? If our goal is to move people off the streets and become people that begin to feel good about themselves and give back to the community, well, how do we measure that if they stay on the street year after year and we provide services for them? Is what we are doing helping people out of destructive patterns? We know, we've talked about it, everyone said it, the number one issue that ultimately destroys the life is what? Addiction. We see that all around us. Or are we keeping them as an addict? Is what I'm doing or what we're providing for individuals, think about this and listen to it carefully, moving them from individuals at one time had appreciation. They were grateful for what you did for them. Then it moves to anticipation. Then it moves to expectation. You need to do this for me, to entitlement, where it becomes demanding, and lastly, to ultimate dependence. I need you to survive. Solomon, one of the wisest men that ever lived, said this, and I think this is interesting: correct your children while there is still hope. And then he goes on to say, so that they will not destroy themselves. Do we love people enough that we want the best for them? And I ask this question: are we willing to correct them when they have destructive behavior? Or are we willing to allow individuals who choose destructive behavior to experience the ramifications of the choices they've made? Or do we simply come in and try to rescue them from the consequences and call it love? When there are no consequences and we reward destructive behavior, guess what you get? More individuals lined up for the reward. And I think, John, you alluded to that. And I say that the system today is broken. The government resources are simply going to enable and keep people in addiction. because they require nothing, expect nothing, and get nothing. And sadly, I wish that was the extent of it. The worst extreme is they also reward the worst behaviors. So when you look at that and you think of the programs, and John, you alluded to it, all you have to do is follow the money. The cities that are receiving the most government funding to solve the problem of homelessness are the cities that homelessness has increased the most. The silver bullet and the philosophy of the government that came along was housing first. The first 5 cities that bought into that, New York, Seattle, Portland, San Diego, and San Francisco, all have declared a major emergency in their city with homelessness because they rewarded the wrong behaviors. Compassion is loving people in a way that you want the best for them. That means restoring dignity, not just giving to them and expecting nothing in return. I find this interesting that God in his creation, the first thing he did with Adam was give him responsibility, a sense of work, and that restores dignity. And when we give to people expecting nothing, guess what we do? We literally take away their dignity. And unfortunately, the government programs have said you cannot expect anything of anyone. And we end up seeing what we see. We understand this principle in nature. This is fascinating to me. How many of you have been to Yellowstone? Love this sign that I saw at Yellowstone. Never attempt to feed the animals. They are wild creatures with natural diets and should not be made to be dependent on handouts. That's interesting. Now again, I'm not talking about those who need help. I believe that one of the very few segments of the population where we have zero accountability, we require nothing, and we reward destructive behavior is with the homeless community. And that's why we've seen the increase that we've seen. Today we've talked a lot about, you know, it was interesting in the stories, accountability, responsibility, restoring dignity, the things that help. One of our case managers was telling me as I walked in the door, how many men that come through the door say, you know, I didn't want accountability, but it's been the best thing for me. And you know, if we simply do what people want, they sometimes self-destruct. Now, I was going to tell a little story, Barb, and I don't know if I have time. I'm probably past my time limit already in terms of when you wanted to be done. But I love to think of it, of the teacher who knew that his kids graduated from school. I see some fellow teachers out here. And you want them all to graduate because they say if a person graduates from school, doesn't have a child out of wedlock, and has a job, they'll be successful. So we want them to graduate, right? So this teacher had 30 students, 5 of which were failing. She goes, you know what I need to do? I need to buy those students a new Apple computer and give them a beautiful backpack, because when they go home, they'll take their homework with them, they'll feel good about themselves, and they'll be better students. So as this year progressed and we turn the clock forward, you can begin to imagine what happened. Within a few months, 5 other students weren't doing too well, and they were asking the teacher for a new computer. And if you return to the school later, you'd probably see that most of the students were in line and all of them were carrying backpacks. And the teacher was saying, I achieved my goal in that the kids were taking their homework home. She forgot to mention they now were playing games on the computer, but as she raised money, she told them they're taking their homework home. But what was the goal? The goal was better grades, right? And sometimes we're trying to say we want to end homelessness. We're rewarding the wrong behavior. Yeah, we made a step. They're taking the books home, but it's not solving the problem of good grades. And so we're putting people under roofs. We're putting people in low barrier shelters, and maybe we're not seeing them on the street, or we're saying we're helping them, but the end result, they're still homeless. And our goal is we want to help people, not enable them. And that is not an easy task, but it's the task that we've been called to, and I believe it happens. You restore dignity through accountability, through giving people a sense of responsibility, giving them the chance to give back, not just take. So that as you walk through this journey, it doesn't start with appreciation and end with entitlement. It starts with appreciation and ends with appreciation. So I know we're ready for our panel. I'm going to, there.